leomach hu a dhia, is mé siúl na slíga bún ní hagaldú.
Gus tusa le ma hiú, a rí an léis na híthe I gríd ó bhuise bé mé slán.
Níl féim le slua is mé a Doral.
Alistair agus Joy.
Godáil cym raw hyn. Si dol yn y
O, diolch yn afis. Alistair cofio'r yw hyn.
A mis yn Glasgow, yn Glasgow. Sfyd hal am y clar, bwr agos hil fyr necht.
O, ta'n fawr. Agus yw hyn, ie, sfyd hal am. Sif sy'n dyn yn gwydio. A dyn yn playlist ag amser gyda tri.
Big word. It's late, chilla.
Dyn yn ysmyd byr nachlar yn ish mar as afis. Dyn sy'n yn cwlor.
Stal am y ma. Ych da chwlwf.
Ie.
Mae Eric Shelvin ysyn.
Cymryd o'ch aros on topic. Yr yn yfer. Cymryd ha Malachi. Cymryd y doel.
Gefa, Harrod.
Ond y chwynig sy'n cyn yn bys.
I'r Zoom.
Zoom.
Gosh.
A mi oedd eich hwyl y dynion eisiau tro Zoom.
Stoch yn bydd cwyd gyda'r greu Zoom generation o hwnni'n edrych, just...
Chog. Chog fath ynda.
Agus by yn anthem ag yng who's zooming who.
O.
Sy'n chwsiens a ham eisiau.
Ha, chwsiens nach am mi gan ych yw.
O, nach
need I fear? What need I fear? What need I fear? What need I fear? What need I fear? When
Well, tá foiilte mhór rómh a lort fechanna ar fod a dóin go chala mór bhagí in seán allscail olú a naie Welcome to all of our viewers today to the Great Hall here at McGee Campus, University of Ulster in Derry, for this very special event celebrating Colmcille and his legacy in Ireland and Scotland as part of his celebrations of 1500 years, and of course the birthday tomorrow being celebrated at the different Columban sites throughout both of the islands. This is a journey through Ireland and Scotland following his legacy, looking at the impact he had and the impact he still has today. Colmcille or St Columba was born in Garthan Colmcille in Donegal in the year 520 or 521 AD. Tá conspóid go leor a buint leis sin, agus beidir gannimid play ar sin. And he died in Ilan in Iona in 597. He's one of Ireland's patron saints. He's also patron saint of this city, the Colmcille. And today we're going to look at some of his legacy, the mark he's left, his achievements, and why indeed we are today still commemorating Colmcille. Today's event is being hosted with a panel both here in the Great Hall and a panel joining us on Zoom. So for the viewers, we encourage you to enter any questions, queries or comments throughout to keep us going here in our discussion. It's brought to you today as part of the joint Colmcille 1500 programme, Clare Colmcille Míle Cuichéad, coordinated by Donegal County Council, Derry City and Strabane District Council, supported by the North West Development Fund, the Executive Office and the Irish Government. Funding has come from Creative Ireland, Forest na Gaeilge and others in relation to the videos, and the councils have been supported also by a cross-border steering group, Colmcille-Columba 1500. There has been extensive collaboration also with groups in Scotland to continue the journey of Colmcille from Ireland to Scotland, and we'll be touching on that today with both of our panel groups, with Colmcille as the common link between both countries in terms of language, culture, folklore and a lot more. I'll introduce our panels first, and in our Irish panel here beside me, and Dr. Brienne Lacey. Brienne Lacey, an archaeologist, historian and author, specialising in Northwest Ireland in the period 500 AD to 1200. Many of his books focus directly on Colmcille, and some of them focus indirectly on Colmcille and some of his followers. And Brian's latest book is Adamnan, Aunan, Unan, The Life and Afterlife of a Donegal Saint, and he has partaken extensively in many of the events celebrating Colmcille in this very special year. So we welcome and Dr. Brienne Lacey. And beside me as well, here in the Great Hall in Magee, is Christy Gillespie, former principal of Colmcille in Termon, and situated in the very heartland of Colmcille country between Garthan, Termon and Kilvacrenan. He has published a book on Colmcille with a special emphasis on the Columban sites in that very rich historical area of Donegal, and he is presently working on a history of Glenloch, another area very rich in folklore and tradition in Year Yishgart Gunangal. And Christy has also been very active in the commemorations during this 1500th year and has been involved in many talks on Colmcille, so we're very glad to have Christy with us. Fáilte Road, Christy. And joining us as well on our Irish panel via Zoom is an Talamh Malachy O'Neill, Professor Malachy O'Neill, who's the Director of Regional Engagement at Ulster University and former Provost as well of Magee. Malachy's research areas are Irish language theatre, the dynasty of O'Neill, and he has overseen some of the Colmcille celebrations himself and was, as recently as last week, involved in chairing a discussion that was held on Colmcille for Tithe and Oireachtais here in Ireland. And of course, it's brilliant to have a link with Derry, as many of the celebrations began here in the university, and it's very fitting that we're coming to the end of the Colmcille year and Malachy is with us. So Fáilte Mhór Malachy O'Neill in Sin Lynn or Zoom. And I'll also introduce our Scottish panel who are joining us on Zoom as well. We have Dr. Alistair White from Ilanhuile, or the island of Mull, a research fellow in Celtic onomastic at the University of Glasgow and focusing on the place names of Mull and Glasgow. There's a focus also on Columban place names, and we might delve into that during our discussion today as well. And Alistair is currently working on a short film called Co-Wilchas, which touches on the shared heritage of place names, of folklore and of identity between the young people of Mull and the young people of the Connemara Gaeltacht as well in Ireland, and that is a project being worked on with NUIG in Galway. Alistair is a singer-songwriter and also features, along with another one of our panellists, Joy Dunlop, in one of the pieces that was commissioned for the special year by Andrew Dunlop, which we'll be hearing and seeing later. So Fáilte Roth, Alistair, and you. Also, we'd like to welcome Joy Dunlop on our panel today. Joy is an acclaimed singer and step dancer. She's also a TV presenter and radio presenter with BBC Alba and BBC Scotland and will be well known to audiences across the water. She's also probably carrying the Colmcille heritage of that shared link between Ireland and Scotland, as she is a part of the acclaimed traditional group Loss, and she's also just started a Gaelic and Gaelic podcast with Idelni Chorin called Anonsanal. So she embodies a lot of the heritage of that journey over and back between both islands, and very welcome with us today in our discussion, Joy Dunlop. And I'd also like to welcome our third Scottish panellist, Brienne O'Hara, the Fáilte Mhórót of Brienne. Banistar le board na Gaelic, leading the board's involvement in international Gaelic partnerships and promotion of the language, culture and heritage. And Brienne is involved in many international projects and international schemes with Forest na Gaeilge and with the Colmcille programme. He's also an acclaimed singer-songwriter, and we might touch on some of the connections between Colmcille, folklore, song and story as well. So the Fáilte Mhór Riv Brienne, they're our panels today, our Scottish panel and our Irish panel. And we encourage you at home to be interactive with us, to submit any questions or any comments as you watch some of the videos today. But we will start our first session with Colmcille, the early years, na blianta luacha la Colmcille, and we'll be watching a range of different videos produced especially for the commemorative year. The first video is Colmcille, Truth, Myths and Legends, and it is produced by Beltania Productions, featuring our speaker, Dr. Brian Lacey here, and is narrated by Mary Hart. And this video will take us on an exploration of the Donegal landscape, sites and cultures associated with the young saint.
Spectacular seaboard of Western Europe. To an ancient people, this was the edge of their world, the roaring Atlantic stretching out to infinity. The northwest corner of Ireland was the birthplace of one of the most influential figures in the spread of Christianity on these islands. He was called Columba in Latin, or Colmcille in Gaelic, meaning dove of the church. This is the story of the lands of his birth.
In the year 521, when Colmcille was born, most people had yet to embrace the new Christian faith. Instead, they were coming to places like this, an ancient ritual site built in a stone circle just outside Raphoe. These rich, fertile lands surrounding the circle were in the control of the powerful Colmcille, and they had been Christianized. One of their members was Colmcille's father, Phelim.
But it's to the lands of Colmcille's mother Ethna that most of the legends associated with the early years of the saint are to be found. Northwest Donegal, in the shadow of Errigal Mountain and the Derryveigh Mountains. I've come here to meet one of Ireland's leading authorities on Colmcille, archaeologist and historian Dr. Brian Lacey.
Well, Colmcille was one of the three patron saints of Ireland. Now we've only one, Patrick, but in the Middle Ages there were three, Patrick, Bridget and Colmcille. In reality, we know very little about Colmcille, but the fact that we know anything at all is a testament to how important he was.
In the Middle Ages, pilgrims from across Europe came to Donegal in search of the many shrines associated with this much-loved saint. 1,500 years after his birth, Colmcille's name still resonates in these lands.
This whole landscape, all around us, all the, going miles, and almost every field has a monument or a story or something about Colmcille. We're in the centre of Colmcille country. And the reason, in a sense, we're here at the beginning is because Kilmacrennan, the old name for Kilmacrennan was Dora Ethna, and Ethna was Colmcille's mother. And this abbey, as I say, is a late medieval abbey, but it's Also in Kilmacrenna there was an ancient abbey. And those two abbeys, those two monasteries, the ancient one and the medieval, later medieval one, both of them were very central in the whole, if you like, the keeping of the lore of Colmcille all through the Middle Ages. So it's a good place to start our journey on the kind of young birth and young life of Colmcille.
There are two shrines associated with Colmcille's birth, both within a short distance of each other. Brian Lacey suggests that the oral evidence points to a sacred place where a medieval church was later to be built.
And there are quite a number of things around here, crosses, a holy well, various other bits and pieces, you know. By tradition, and we've just above the lake below us, Loch Kibben, and on the night before Colmcille was born, a stone was floating on the surface of the lake, and Colmcille's mother, Etna, got some people, servants or whoever, to bring that stone up to this place, and then it was on that stone that the saint was born.
In the nearby townland of Garton, a possible megalith of pre-Christian origin is also believed to have been where Etna gave birth to her son.
Particularly Lady Adair, that lived in Glenveigh Castle, she kind of gave it this, her authority, if you like, that this was the birthplace. But as we know, everything in Ireland is always a split, and there's a split about the identity of Colmcille's birthplace. This is one, but I think the more authentic one is the other side.
The next shrine on the pilgrimage is a place where it's believed the child was baptised Columba, Colmcille, most likely at a small stream.
This is Temple Douglas, or in Irish Tulloch Douglas, and it's named after a stream just down there, the Douglas, or the Dove, the Black Stream. And by tradition, this was the site where Colmcille was baptised. So, you know, as you move around this pilgrimage, you're seeing kind of various episodes in the saint's life, and this is where he's supposed to be baptised. All around here, there's all sorts of stories about Colmcille. And for instance, that hill up there behind us, that's Crookatee, or the Hill of the Sitting. And the tradition of that is, or at least the explanation, legendary explanation, is that Colmcille sat down one day on the ground, but because Colmcille was so holy, the ground raised him up to heaven and formed the hill.
So he was closer to heaven.
He was close to heaven, and that's been Crookatee ever since.
So we'll have to put that one down to legend or myth.
I think so. This is Cédimocht Colmcille, as it's called in Irish, which I'm sure you know means the first going, or the first movement, I suppose, of Colmcille. And the reason for that is because of these two marks in the rock, and they're supposed to be a memorial of Colmcille's first walking steps as a baby. So this site was a holy site and was part of a pilgrimage all around this area in honour of Colmcille.
People have continued for more than 1,000 years to seek the divine intercession of the saint. There are many cures and relics associated with Colmcille to this day. One such relic is the chalky white Garton clay. It's said to keep safe those who carry it with them.
It's one of the customs associated with the site, and comes from the hills over there. And by tradition, that's where Etna, Colmcille's mother, first experienced or felt the pains of labour, of his birth. And she passed some blood, and that is part of that tradition. And it is one of the great customs of Donegal and associated with St. Colmcille.
The young Colmcille would be sent away from his birthplace to be educated, customary within the Gaelic nobility. Columba was under the tutelage of Christian clerics. He would embrace the doctrines of Christianity and go on to establish a centre of Christian learning on the Scottish island of Iona.
He was a tremendously important cleric, intellectual, and left us all kinds of heritages. Iona was one of the great institutions, I think you could say, of Western Europe in the early Middle Ages. It's really because of that and the inheritance from that that we can, if you like, attribute his importance.
From Iona, a network of Columban monasteries and churches would flourish across Ireland and Britain. And in the lands of his birth, his name would resonate too, 1,500 years later, in Donegal, in Glen Colmcille, in Derry, Dora, Colmcille. Testament to the influence this powerful saint had on the religious and the secular lives in his homeland, and the spread of Christianity on these islands.
Colmcille, Truth, Myths and Legends, our first video here today, and we're going to have a panel discussion now here with our Irish panel and with Malachy, who joins us on Zoom as well. And Brian, seeing that you starred in that video, I might start with you. It really sort of explained the cult of Colmcille in some ways. The folklore, the pishragi, the historical fact has all become mixed into one to further his name. Is it very hard for yourself as a historian, when looking back on Colmcille's legacy, separating that myth and legend from what is believed to be historical fact?
Well, he was born 1,500 years ago, and ever since then people have been not only preserving the stories about him, but adding to them and elaborating on them. And that's a great thing itself. You know, that would only have happened because he was so important in his own lifetime. So the fact that stories have gathered around him, you know, it's unusual in the sense that it was, you know, for him. But yeah, people like me spend our lives trying to pull it all apart and disentangle the reality. But can I just say one thing before it just strikes me? One of the miracles attributed to Colmcille on Iona was that he could see things in other places at the same time. And he and the people around him at the time would have thought that this event would be a kind of a miracle, that we can all link up across from Scotland to Ireland. There are people looking at us from all over the world. So it is a kind of, and certainly would have been thought of as kind of a miracle in those days.
Do you see yourself that maybe Colmcille's cult or the myths around him, were they greater than those of other Irish saints, perhaps?
He's one, you know, in the Middle Ages, he's certainly one of the three so-called patron saints of Ireland. But in some ways, he's the kind of favourite. He's the, you know, the one that people think about. And there are more stories about him. There are stories about Patrick and stories about Bridget, of course. But there are more stories about Colmcille. Virtually every parish in Ireland has a story about Colmcille, a holy well or something or other. And in some ways, Colmcille, you know, in legend anyway, in the stories that are told about him, he runs the gamut of all human, you know, emotions and human carry-on, if you like. Colmcille is a recognisable character. He's a bit like ourselves and all the bits of ourselves. And I think that's why people liked him and kind of made up more stories about him.
Christy, of course, you are based very centrally and have extensively studied the heartland of Colmcille, I suppose, his birthplace, the sites that are so important to him around Garth and Charmon, Kilmacrennan. That area is so central to Colmcille, and over the passage of time has only become more revered maybe, and now we're seeing the amount of events commemorating it. Is he as special still in the area to the people? Do they still revere him as his cult must have kept him alive over all those years?
Very, very much so. I think maybe the one pity over the commemoration, I was just saying it to Brian earlier, over the last 2 years, is that there's maybe been too much emphasis put on the myth end of it, because he was a very real person. He lived in the last 3/4 of the 6th century, and he achieved so much that here we are 1,500 years later commemorating him. And like when I took over in Termon School first, which would be equidistant from where he was born, where he first went to school, where he was baptized, then you had the Dune Rock right beside us, where all of course, the O'Donnell chieftains were inaugurated, but not just the O'Donnell chieftains, but Colmcille's clan long before that. And there's a lovely saying around the Carlingford area in County Louth that if you kick a stone, it'll tell you a story. Or that things are written in stone. And like a lot of what we know about Colmcille and his family before him, it's prehistory as such, because Colmcille's monks were the first people to write down history in a chronological order. So anything before that, you're looking at prehistory as such. So sometimes what you've got to do is you've got to look at the place names, because in Ireland we do one of two things. We either call a place name after something geographical, but often if something historical has happened in that area, then you'll get that written into history, and there's a purity about it because it doesn't change over time. So just to give you one example, if you look out from where Colmcille was born in Garton and you look across the lake, the big extensive town land that's across from you is called Chirargus, or the townland of Fergus. Now that doesn't mean an awful lot to people until you realise that Fergus was his grandfather. So in other words, that townland would have been called that name for the last 1600 years. And when you look at like that there probably isn't a place in Ireland that is as historical as that area around Garton, and say if you take a 10-mile radius around that.
And perhaps the cult and the veneration of Colmcille helped to preserve a lot of that prehistorical legend and prehistorical stories in the Garth and Charmon, Kilmacrennan areas associated with his birth?
Well, very, very much so. And again, it was passed on from generation to generation, as Brian was talking about, the lifting of Garton clay being one example of. And that was all recorded, fireside, passed on from generation to generation. And it wouldn't be then until 1532 when Manus O'Donnell, who was the grandfather of Red Hugh, that he had it all compiled, probably using as the starting point 1521, which was the 1000th anniversary of the saint's birth. And so he got a group of Franciscan monks together, and they went out through the country gathering all that lore. And also they worked off 20 written sources, put the whole thing together in Lifford Castle. And so what he has written down that is recording all of those practices that had gone on for centuries and centuries before that. And it's a very unique book. It's kind of looked on really now as being one of the greatest of the later medieval manuscripts. It's in the Bodleian Library now in Lifford. But what you've got, in Oxford, but when you look at the vast amount of stories in that, you have to then start picking, through it and taking out the fables and the legends, because in there's a lot of good history as well, preserving again those place names and all that was associated with Colmcille.
Jumping from Donegal to Derry, and my next question is for Malachy O'Neill. Malachy, we're coming to the end of the Colmcille celebrations this very special year, of course. He is also the patron saint of Derry, and I suppose it was very important that the celebrations began here in the university, and that you're coming to a close as well, that you're carrying the Colmcille story that is so important to this city and to this county, and maybe renewing and reinvestigating it in terms of not just folklore, research, heritage and history.
Yeah, Guramila Moigat, Anya August Arnoya to Luhar Warring, they more constant than Kelleru and you. It's been an incredible year since the 7th of December last year, when we initiated this year of commemoration. The inaugural event was hosted, as has been the norm in these times, online. It was in the planning. We'd hoped that it would be an event for schools, and in particular Irish or Gaelic speaking schools in the northwest, the Columban region, if you like. And we managed to bring together schools from Derry itself, from the neighbouring counties of Tyrone, Donegal, in the most part, and we had an Irish and Scottish Gaelic event supported by Forest na Gaeilge, by Colmcille itself. and we were I suppose it was based around that notion of shared inheritance, and that legacy of Colmcille that Christy and Brian have spoken of just now. We were delighted to initiate the year of celebration from Ulster University's McGee campus in Derry, as you say, and it's our delight that the year comes to a close, if you like. Although I have a notion that these celebrations will go on for quite some time. I know that we're looking at year 2 of this celebration already, but we're delighted to play host to today's proceedings from our McGee campus.
And on another note, Malachy, I suppose we've spoken about a lot of the lore of Colmcille would have been taken down in Irish. Of course, there are stories as well in Scottish Gaelic, and he has become a kind of a symbol bridging the gap between Scotland and Ireland, and that tradition of a shared language, a shared culture, the travel between the countries. Is it important to you that we embrace, even from a language perspective, literature and folklore, that we emphasise those common links now in this special year and possibly going on to a second year of commemorations?
Yeah, and I think it's incredibly timely, and Brian already has given us a nod to the Zoom generation and how Colmcille could be seen and could see things in different parts of the world simultaneously. Brian also made the point to me in preparation for one of our many Colmcille focused events this year, when he was preparing to do a keynote at the American Conference of Irish Studies, which we hosted from McGee also earlier this year, and with Colmcille as a key figure therein. Brian commented that it was reflective of Columban heritage that Colmcille had predicted that the great and the good would be unable to attend his funeral when it ultimately came to pass, and it was quite eerie then when I found myself in the Great Hall at McGee alongside Brian and a few technicians, with between 500 and 600 delegates joining us online for that keynote on Colmcille. So it's incredible how history repeats itself, but it was perhaps part of that Columban prophecy that we've managed to run so many events online in these challenging times, but to make this such a vibrant and inclusive celebration. We had the initial event for schools on the 7th of December last year. We had the Columban reflection in the Skull Every Merryman and Lake Colmcille from Maynooth. I've mentioned the ACES conference, which was an international colloquium for scholars of Irish studies, and Colmcille was omnipresent throughout the course of that event. And then in recent weeks, of course, we've had our annual Eag to Colmcille, which had Colmcille as the central theme this year, also and focused particularly on literary scholarship between Ireland, Scotland, and indeed Iceland and other nationalities that have found themselves part of this shared Gaelic story. And I think it's very timely that we, in a period where we're dealing with Brexit and post-Brexit, at a time when we're looking at aspects of shared island, particularly north and south, but indeed east and west also, that we have Colmcille as that unifying force in these discussions.
Well, Malachy, I'm going to move on now to a video. We'll be coming back to our panel because I want to get into the controversial subject of the founding of the monastery in Derry and maybe some of the reasons for his, some would say exile, some would say his evangelizing mission to Iona. But our second video in Colmcille's Donegal. Colmcille Conlach Crefach Kroge, a chora leher ag Roshin Clafferty, ag Shaw Fishan, at a gentle Corlicondai Gunangal, Gasidig Jidu or the Lightaha, agus an Towart at a Colmcille a Gondai Gunangal.
Siad a bhatha, Fáilte am rah the chóladar. Míle cuigchead bliana han, síla ó Bobby bag sa cheantar seo an gáirtan a gondaún an gáil. An ihe rah bhrihan leanamh, deartar go danig angel chaig eithne, muithar an leanamh, agus gurúir se léhí gur leach hís de láfa cebain agus gur thóir an leach sin a hóite níos go ra cró. Lach eithne go thuail le cóla an angel, agus thug bach le far muntre léhí síos go dtíon lá. Ar a mala arás agus an leach leá, thuail painti brethe eithne agus hill sí brenn ní fála. Rinne far sa wacle, iarad an smáil dearag an talú a chlúda le raithne. Haig eithne ómús an gríomh seo agus dúirt sí leis gan a bheith buairtha, mar na deochú duine bí a chuithe an éid seo a héan agus a chleocht. Seo an éid inis a thugtar créig airtain. Go luúan na dhé sin sílaí amach bag de eithne agus de fear céile filmí, agus deirtar go rugadh é an mothan bag an a ró an leach mar orlar an. A go tuige a bhfuil muide caint ar an té seo a bhfuil matas, mistíir, monasteirthe, maisteach pin agus malachtaí luite leis, agus go tuige a bhfuil muide chealarú 1500 bliana a níomh réthe. Fáin leom go bhfuil muid splithiú bag ar níomh Colmcille, agus ar an tlú bhaint a bhí aige leis an tíb seo tíre agus atá ar náide go dtí an leniu. De réir cosúlaachta, hennig Colmcille ar an tíal ar an 7 lá de bhí bhean jebhrí sa bhliain 550 a héin a ra crá. Agus de réir an teanachais, sílaú é a mothan bag an a róleach ó lámha cebain mar orlar an. Bhí an ag Colmcille ar a éid thuúthaí se gcónaí, agus deirtar go déananig Colmcille arás an seo ina ar ág, agus mar dhéile dé gur thóg sé cind a cheadmhainistrithe an éite bhréthe. Tá íorsmí na mhainistrithe de feiceáil an seo go fáil. Is chuid de thoras iad na híorsmí seo a bhín sa siúil an bhliain idir lá éile Colmcille ar an 9 lá de bhí an bheitheh agus lá éile mhara ar an 5 lá déag de bhí lunasa. Is tradition láidir iad na toirí seo an ómas de Colmcille. Ní bhhainn seo an gáirtan, a néide eile go háirithe an glean Colmcille a neisceart an handaid. Ar an dráthúar, níl an leach ar a rugadh Colmcille le feiceáil níos mó. A tá leach eile sa cheantar mai gúirt ar a doctor leach na cuaí. Agus bíonn dul mú ar ghaoine a bheasan gur seo an leach ar a rugadh Colmcille a ní dóithe é. Sin ráite, bhí buinte Colmcille leis an leach seo fásta, agus léirítear is saothar bhána sí hónal an dóithe bhuair an leach a hangam. Lá bháin agus Colmcille sa cheantar, hennig fear chaige a bhí críomhreiste, mar go bhfuair chuid mhór a chairde agus a ghaoine muintere buas. Bar leis chéan an buas a ail na ha bheith beá an na né. Bhí trú a mór ag Colmcille dá, agus bhainigh sé leach chláithe a bhí an aice leis, agus dír sé ar an near, bríon uisce áil as an leach, anas go ratha a chuaí ar gúil, agus chuaí. Ón lá sin go dtí an leniu tá go leach na cuaí arthaí. Deirtar fásta gur chaid Colmcille é héan a ihe dhearna an seo ar leach na cuaí, so le deithe sé ar deoraíocht go halabain agus go heilean níos moille ina híal. Bhí an leach an úsa de rís san 9 hístíag, le cuaí brón agus buirt a bhuialú. Dírí sé na nós go gaithú locht Amirce a 9 dhearna ar an leach, ag súil go mbeadh sí níos fosa, úla an bhróine ampar, de galthaid ar an leach go díire mar a rinne Colmcille na 4 bliain roimhe.
Sin Colmcille, Conalach Crefach Croga, Fishan a Vig Corle Condai Gunangala Choralahed, Eg Roshe Ni Clafferty Inshin. And we will return to our panel discussion now, and we certainly have plenty to discuss, and our listeners and our viewers have been submitting questions and comments, and we'll remind you to keep that going as you follow the discussion with us today, live from the Great Hall here in Magee. Well, Beidir Dus by Brienne, I'm going to ask you a question that could be controversial. Derry Monastery, 545, did Colmcille found this? What is the controversy that surrounds maybe the differing opinions on this?
That's the tradition and the legend. Oh, sorry. That's the tradition and the legend. But in fact, the earliest sources we have, the annals, say that somebody else founded Derry. Now, a man called Fiachra McKieran. But Fiachra, I have to tell you, was a nephew of Colmcille. So we kept it in the family. It really doesn't matter very much. You know, in the sense that almost certainly, without any doubt, in fact, Derry was part of the Columban Federation. But whether he himself was directly involved is another question. And the earliest evidence seems to point, you know, to another explanation. But as I say, the man who's given in the sources the role, Fiachra McKieran, he belonged to the Colmcille-Columba, he was a member of a kind of royal, noble family, and he was a nephew of Colmcille. So, you know, I think it's a subtle point, not a major problem.
Maybe a little bit blurred with the passage of time.
Oh, absolutely.
And Christy, maybe you wouldn't be at the same page there as Brian. What do you think of the Derry controversy?
Well, I think the boxing gloves are on it already. No, Brian is right that in the annals of Ulster you have the line that tells us that Fiachra dies in 619, and he was the other founder of Derry. Now, if you have the word other there, then that means that there had to be another person. So in other words, what I believe that line is all about is that, as was Colmcille's modus operandi, he would have founded the monastery, and then he would have passed it on to somebody in his own clan to bring it on, to nurture it, to allow it to grow. And Colmcille we have kind of a lot of evidence for him doing this over and over again. Now, if you understand who this Fiachra was, and Fiachra would have been very, very much associated with Conwall Monastery that's just outside of Derry, or outside of Letterkenny on the Glenties Road. And I actually believe that Conwall, where the churchyard is now, should be a Columban monastery, or accepted as a Columban monastery at this stage as well. And that Fiachra was very much associated with that monastery. So I believe myself what would have happened in this case is he would have cut his teeth with Conwall, and then he would have been moved kind of upstairs to Derry, where he would have taken over there, because Colmcille, as I said, his modus operandi always was to found a monastery, and then because he was founding so many, then he would have moved on and to make sure that somebody was looking after it for him. And we know that Colmcille had an awful lot of monasteries, because in later years, when the abbots of Iona, you see in the annals that they would leave to come over to Ireland, and they might spend 2-3 years at a time in Ireland doing the tour of the monasteries before they would go back again to Iona. So that to me tells me that there had to be big numbers. You were looking, and it wasn't always that the Colmcille would found these monasteries, he would actually take them over. An example being that Kilmacrennan was already a foundation before Colmcille took it over, as was Temple Douglas. So these weren't ones that he founded, but they kind of became part of a franchise, for want of a better way of putting it.
Malachy, I might address this question to you. Of course, Derry, as Colmcille is the patron saint, would there appear to be as much of maybe the cult of Colmcille as was spread in perhaps areas of Donegal and so on? Would there be much evidence of the Neo-Shanachas and the folklore and the tales and the sites here in Derry, as there would, for example, in areas like Garth and Glan Colmcille that perhaps he never actually was based in, and so on? The tales and the sites here in Derry, as there would, for example, in areas like Garth and Glan Colmcille that perhaps he never actually was based in.
Yeah, Anya, I think the the nomenclature that's associated with Columba and Colmcille is far and wide. It's quite prolific and fairly omnipresent throughout the historic city of Derry and its hinterland. But even into my own community in Mid-Ulster, for example, my son plays for a hurling club called Neve Colmcille, and there are many examples of schools, associations, groups, historical organizations, cultural events, etc., that bear that Columba name, and it's all a reflection of the significance of the individual in historical terms, but also I feel that notion of shared heritage as well, and the acceptability of and acceptance of Colmcille or Columba as a representative of the Northwest and that Northwest city region in the first instance, but also of communities that go way beyond that space, and indeed across Shrewk and Amelia, and into Scotland also. And I was heartened by the work of, for example, the heritage group in Cales, with whom we collaborated with on a regular basis this year. So it was very much a nationwide celebration in Irish terms, but also taking in our Scottish brothers, sisters, and cousins, and indeed in those international terms, the celebration that we enjoyed at Ulster University's McGee campus through the American Conference of Irish Studies, and then into Canada also, and an honourable mention for my good friend Ian McApherson, who is Scottish Canadian, of course, but has contributed to a series of our events and was one of our key speakers and key conveners of the inaugural event, which kicked off the celebration this year also. So I think the celebration of Colmcille in terms of nomenclature, certainly, while its roots might be in the Northwest, it certainly goes well beyond that.
Perfect, Malachy. And yes, as you say, we are going to be hopping over and back through the Muile during today's discussion. A question has come in from one of our panellists, Phil Boyle, who's watching on Zoom from America, saying, my family hails from Colmcille, but I've heard that Colmcille was never really there. Can you clarify, Brian Lacey, is this part of the Niamh Hanachas and the cult of the saint?
Well, you know, in any discussion about a saint, you always have to have the devil's advocate as part of the debate. And I sort of the devil's advocate, pulling apart all these legends. Now, I have quite a lot of relations and connections with Colmcille, and I go there every summer, so I'm certainly not going to start attacking them. But I have to say that a local historian in Donegal, Dr. Lachlan McGill, has argued that Colmcille was never. What we do know is, you know, there is a very ancient early Christian material from Colmcille, all the stations of the Thuras, and that there is a traditional Thuras or pilgrimage in honour of the saint around the glen every year again from the 9th of June to the 15th of August. And but there are traditions of other saints in the area. Saint Colmcille, who's associated with Inishkail of Nairn and Portneuf. So, you know, again, the evidence really is not, you know, the absolutely clear evidence is not there. So we have a combination of a little bit of evidence, lots of legends, and we have to try to sort it out.
Hopefully that might have helped. Christy, you want to come in on this point as well?
Well, I better come in on it because I'm from Kilcara originally, so I better stick up for the Southwest here. You see, sometimes I think maybe as a wee problem with Colmcille that we get all caught up in, did he found it? Was it part of his federation? Because this work went on over hundreds of years. So, I mean, Colmcille took the lead in a lot of these monasteries, and then his federation kind of went on with it. Now, I think what's interesting with Glen is that if you look at the Columban foundations that were in Donegal, if you take out the ones that were in his local area, you're looking at Garton, Temple Douglas, Kilmacrennan, that all were part of his own life story. But if you look at all the rest of them, they were all on the edges of the Kinnell-Connell territory. So if you start off because Derry was part of the colonial territory at the time, and so you had a monastery there. You had one in Raphoe, which was right on the border, one in Drumholm, right down on the south eastern border, and then Colmcille over in the corner, and up north then a very early one on Torrey Island. So, I mean, the one on Colmcille is a very interesting one because they were digging a grave for a man by the surname name of Foles in 1842 in Glen Graveyard, where the monastery would have been originally. And you can imagine the shock of the two boys. They were digging a grave and suddenly the grave collapsed. And they discovered a souterrain running underneath the whole graveyard. And the monastery there would have been using that souterrain during peace times as a kind of a fridge or a place for keeping, and then at times of attack as a place where they could hide. And so that's where the original monastery would have been in Colmcille. Now, if I was a betting person, the last thing I would say about Colmcille is that it's the only parish in Ireland that's named after the saint. Mm-hmm. Even though there's 1,300 schools named after him, there's only one parish, and that's Colmcille. So if I was a betting person, I would say Colmcille's Federation in Glen, definitely yes.
Okay, there we have it on Colmcille. And a question for both of you now. I'll start with you, Brian. If Colmcille had not been maybe guided or steered down the monastic route, how different things would have been if he had followed the chieftain tradition, if he hadn't travelled to Iona, for example,
yeah,
and stayed in Donegal?
That is an interesting question, because Colmcille's people, the Colmcille, were a very powerful aristocracy. Now, there's an awful lot of exaggeration, you know, that Colmcille could have become King of Ireland and all those kinds of. That's exaggeration. In the first place, there wasn't such a thing as a King of Ireland in this day, but there were very powerful kings in Ireland, and his family contributed to them, particularly the kings of Tara. So yes, Colmcille obviously was highly intelligent. We now know, if you like, as a result of studying him, that he was a highly educated person in both the Gaelic or the kind of Druidic tradition to some extent, and then in the Christian Latin learning. And they combined those things. So undoubtedly Colmcille would have found his way into some important role if he hadn't been a monk and gone off to found Iona. Yeah.
And Christy, perhaps the legend involving his mother Etna and how she steered him?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would look at a situation where definitely his grandfather, who was Fergus, that he was in control of an area at the time that was ranging from the Swilly River right across to the Crowley or the Dora River. So a very, very extensive area at that time known as Cheer Argus, or Manus O'Donnell calls it Cheer Ferrigne. Now, his father, according to Manus O'Donnell, was also chieftain of the same clan. But then when it came to Colmcille, I believe that his mother had a huge influence in guiding him down the ecclesiastical route, because she seems to have done so much for Christianity in that given area, because very unusually there's a well named after her, and normally a holy well is named after the holy person of the area, you know, what we would call a saint, though they're not a saint in, you know, in official terms. But in this case, it's the mother of a saint that gets named Tuber Ethna. And also where he first went to school was known as Dura Ethna, or the Oak Grove of Ethna. So the monastery there was named after her as well. So to my mind, that shows that she was actually bankrolling, or she was sponsoring where Colmcille first went to school. And I suppose the biggest thing that she did from the point of view of Christianity was she put him down that route of that instead of him leading on from his grandfather and his father to the natural line of, well, you're next, that she steered him down this route, because he certainly wouldn't have been making the choice himself as a 3 or a 4-year-old. And as a result of that, the power base of the family moved across to his uncle, who was Setna. And from Setna came a son called Louis, or Luja, and that area became known as Cheer Luja afterwards. And his brother, then Anvera, became the first High King of the Ineal from the north, and another son, Aid, after him, became High King as well. So the power base seemed to have moved from Colmcille's father and granddad across to another line in the family, who went on to become High Kings.
And perhaps one final question, Beidir Asgaelige, da Valaki. Malachy tá chud mhór de chud seanachas Colmcille scrífa go Lord Leanta scríú go leor dá ngéalaigh bethe Colmcille go scríú nó annan chud do chomáid. Go dtí go tehairt agus a teise do Lord Taide go bhfuil na fonsí sinón scrífa agus gur féidir le daoine an taide sin na dhéanú, mar ná bhfuil beidir na fonsí sin ar foiile ar chud mhór eile de han seanachas na héireann.
Gur maigad as sinna aine agus tá sé vi mas meter sin maidin aniu an taras a bhain le bheith de Ólanmór Gaeilge in sa chud seo den dóin agus ní heagla a bheith de Ólanmór Gaeilge credim gan castail ar Colmcille agus gan castail ar Colmcille gomininic agus de mar hen an taras sin a ra chéan tú a dahi ar chud mhór den Chanachas agus den Scéala agus den Star breig agus vír a bhain le Colmcille an chiad tahi bhí agam héan ar Colmcille na nar thug me cuairt ar watharóirtaí mar scolar a Gaeltachta agus dólamid an scéal a bhain le crop na níu agus Colmcille agus Finnan agus Begville agus Dúach agus na Crushinní agus iad golamach géirí golamach gotáirí leis an Chrístiacht a thuirt a ad leis an Ilan. Ag tá sin granta in sa taras sin a bhíon ag Gaeilgeoir credim go mbíonn buint ag an Star agus ag an Scoláireacht a bhain le Colmcille. An maisteir Gaeilge a bhí agam ar scáil an Tahar Anry me Gile Choil nach marin Scholar a mór Colmcille a bhí an fásta agus dunne do bhhainú uire Colmcille a bhí an cumáid agus chuir sé sin agran nua ama agran nua Gaeilge ama den tíhir sin le Manas O'Donnell a Louis Brienne agus Christy Gillespie batha Colmcille agus tá cóglacilam an Dr. Neil Comer ag obair ar agran den agran nua Gaeilge sin san am láthair. Téan an scoláireacht sin a ra agus chuann sin meas míú fásta ar obair a rinmuid mar chuid de choiste léon na Gaeilge Itriach na Gaeilge agus na Galtar Ceilteach in san Acadú Riga am níana fásta chumid ma rint comisiún a bhain le ceáil le hálín agus le sihir litartha agus be na comisiún sin le seáú go lua an sa bblion uair is dóthe ach be clár ar TG Cahar san ihe marach ar lehanne seacht ag ddíriú ar athbhatha agus Colmcille Ildanach nó athbhatha atá mar heideal ar an chláir sin agus léironn sé sin go déan an obair scolartha seo a ra in almost a Colmcille agus tá cruthítheacht ag buint leis an obair sin cumáid ach léironn sé go bhfuil beocht in sa Stair sin beocht in sa Chanachas sin agus beocht in sa scéal sin a bhaine le Colmcille agus gomara sé mar sin.
Good a míle maithigad Malachy. Well, viewers at home, we would encourage you to keep sending in your questions and your comments so that we can put them to our panels during our discussion. We're moving on now to session 2, Ireland and Foundations, and in this part we're moving from Donegal to Derry and beyond on our journey with Colmcille as we follow his journey towards Iona and of course the legacy and the impact today. We'll have 2 videos now, we'll have one after the other. Firstly, Daia Colmcille's Derry, narrated by Padraig McCongill Africa Gaeilge la Corle Chahergaye agus an Trahabain, and the second one is Dora Colmcille's Legacy, which has been produced by Neil McGrory, and in this video we will go to Dora in County Offaly where Colmcille founded a monastery, and this video was supported by the Offaly Historical Society and Offaly County Council, but we'll start first with Daia Colmcille's Derry.
Uglis Niamh Augustine sitse chráid hiúin díra taobhistí do bhálaí na cartha. Bíonn si oscailte don phobal agus do chuairteoirí idir an chaisc agus manfór do ghra. Tá féine se an go bhfuil Uglis Niamh Augustine ar an láthair chéarna ná inta gar daí ar a ró an chéad Uglis de chuid na Monistra an Uglish a Hugter an Dúr Uglish ná an Black Church sa Bharla. Tás agin gur thug rí a cheantar dúthis mac Éanmhire, talú do Colmcille an seo ag deire Calga, mar a tugu ghuire ag an am, hon Monasteir a bhunú. Lás Colmcille tinne leis an talú a glanú hon Monasteir a bhunú. Go tuban spré an tinne agus is beag nar scriosú Cilín Dara. Rí Colmcille leis na crin a chosaint agus sábhalú iad. Téan aim Uglish Níomh Augustine siar go dtí an taim a neathí mánaí Monasteir Colmcille iste san ord Augustina, sa darnú hísteag nó sa tríú hísteag. Sa seachtú hísteag a tógu dús an Uglish atá nision, ach a tógu san achtú hísteag agus san níú hísteag. Tá aras Colmcille site halamh Uglish an túr ada. Anad dóiatán le learga sa ail scéaltaí Colmcille níomh fatrún na cara. Tá cafe taispeantais fuaime agus físe an agus go leor rudaí le feiceáil agus le laibhseil. Tá aras Colmcille agus Uglish an túr ada beirt an láthair chearna nó Gardaí a ró an Chample Mór sa darna hísteag. Tá sé anan agus cinse go bhfuil Uglish an túr ada mar an ggéarna le Uglish Níomh Augustine agus aras Colmcille, taobhistí den talú ina ró Monasteir Umlan ghuire sa bhanis. Tagan an tainneam an túr ada ó chlugcheach a bhí an seo go dtí an seachtú hísteag. Bhí an chlugcheach in aca leis an Chample Mór a tógu sa bhríon 1163. Bhí an Chample Mór ina ábhar aontais nuair a tógu mar theas sé amach go mór ó na fuirigneamh eile a bhí thart ar. Ard Uglish bhain éise a bhí sa Chample Mór go dtí gur scriosú i bléascu sa bhliain 1567 nuair a bhí saidirí Sasnatha a thuasaid mar Storas Púdar Gunna. Tógu Uglish Colmcille an túr fada sa bhliain 1784 agus thug Chalky agus Protestúnaí a réon airgid ar a son. Sa níú hísteag bhí scéal Colmcille go fáil ag imirt tionachar chrúth na cara agus a fuirigneamh fuibli. Chur an tathair Willie Doherty go mór leis an Uglish ag deireadh an níú hísteag agus i dús na fiú chéise. Bhéadaí agus dathraí sé ag deanú Chample Mór nua dí. Tá nasc silliúr le feiceáil idir an Uglish Colmcille agus bonú Monasteir ghuire in linne ghailte na bhainneoga sna mósaigí úlár na Uglishe agus os ceann an phríomh gharis. Tá an tobar banithe seo ag crí lár an céileartha an níú lá meitheamh féile Colmcille. Tagan mórthúil an nuas an croc ó Uglish an túr ada agus banítar an tobar. Ian an sagart cosaint leocht leanta Colmcille a thuúlann mar thuúil sesin a ghaíonn mar ghaí sesin. Líanann daoine buideal leis an uisce le na hort seála. Deirtar go bhfuil léas san uisce galar go háirithe galar na súl. Sa bhatha Colmcille ag manas ó Doral. Deirtar gur tugu leanamh i láthair Colmcille le na bhaistú ach ní raibh aon uisce inach i leibhe. Mar sin cear an naomh cuartha na crise an chlách agus tháinig tobar uisce astí. Cilíonn de chrinn Dara an chéal atá leis an acaill deire. Níú lá meitheamh cuirtar duilleoga Dara mar bhaisiú an tobar agus caithin ilithrí duilleog Dara a gcuid éadaí. Tógu ard Uglish Colmcille idir 1628 agus 1633 agus mar chuid de Uglish na hÉireann. Náid bhí cónaí in éire le fada ach sé seo an fuirigneamh is sinne sa chathair sa lá tainiúil. Ba í seo an céad ard Uglish Anglicánach a tógus na hillainn seo ó bhí an Reformation an. Tá an cloch tiomnaithe site go ddéireadh taobhistí den doras hir agus in ómós do thógáil na hard Uglishe do Winter Lundain a díag astí. Tá cloch níos lú agus níos sinne gramithe iste sa cloch seo. Deirtar gur tháinig sí seo ón teampall mór Arddouglas ghuire sa bhanis. Le fada an lá tá irsmí chean bhuileann gaotha lonithe ar thalamh manscoile in nire nó ghlacú leis gur sinna bhí an cabbé. Le blianta anuas bhí barúil eile ag kids den na múntrí sa scóil agus sé sin nach mhuileann gaotha a bhí an ar chorbaí ach cloigtheach mór maníise a bhí mar phríomh arighnú nó mar cheann cheathrú bhainisteoir Colmcille. Thuaigh na múntrí seo sa tóir ar aonaise trí léirscailena agus ábhar eile. Le 10 mbliana anuas tá dul cinn mór deanta acu agus analís deanta ag Ollscoil na Banríona ar hamplaí fisiciúla ón siomh féin a chin sin gur irsmí man éisethe atá iontu agus seans gur tógu an cloigthe chomh luath le 1500. Ar náid is tíbhistí de gheataí cholaiste cholas Christ atá na hirsmí seo sa látha nuam ach ba é seo bonsaíomh cholaiste Colmcille agus an áitear ón scoil sin site le fada an lá. Is seoid luachhuair iad na hirsmí seo agus an teolas uair seo ón saoil mar a bhí in nire Colmcille bagna 1000 bliain ó shin a bhfuil tú abalta dá suas agus dá lá a chur ar. Curú dealamh uair Colmcille I barc Colmcille sa bhliain 2013 agus é ní dréithe ar airde. Tá simbalathas tábhachta ag baint leis agus é ag ligean do chalam imeacht san air bhuaí. Ar náid tá an dealamh seo site Ainta cóngra de irsmí Cil-Bhracain atá ar na fuirigneamh is sinne sa chathair a bhaineann leis an chríostaíocht.
The monastery was founded by Colmcille probably towards the end of the 6th century. It's often debated, but certainly in the second half. It was granted to Colmcille by Éamach Breanon, King of Teffia. The major surviving monument at Dora is the Dora High Cross. It's about 12 feet high, and it's very much like the Cross of Monaster Boyce or the Cross of the Scriptures at Clonmacnoise.
And in the year 1990, we started a campaign to have a right of public access to Dora and to see the cleaning up and restoration generally of the historical site. And that did work out very well in that in 2003-04, the High Cross was moved inside for its better securing from weathering, and the church was completely restored.
one of the greatest treasure, probably the greatest treasure from the monastery of Dora is the world famous Book of Dora. It was written towards the end of the 7th century, and it is 100 years older than the Book of Kells.
The Pattern of Dora takes place on the 9th of June of each year, which is the commemoration date of the death of St. Colmcille. This pattern has been going on in Dora for hundreds of years. And at this stage I would like to compliment the various pattern committees who over the centuries have kept this tradition going. And that includes the Curtain Committee, who even in this current year put on a version of a pattern. Over the years, they faced adversity as well, because back through the centuries, such things as loads of clay and stones on the avenue to stop them travelling down, gates being locked. But somehow or other on Pattern Day, St. Colmcille always seemed to clear the way. The community of Dora rallied round again for the gathering in 2013, in which once again St. Colmcille was celebrated. Because I think St. Colmcille drew the families home for that, and we had hundreds of people celebrating that event. And even this year, to pay tribute to the community once again and the Pattern Committee, we did have a celebration on Pattern Day this year on the 9th of June, despite the COVID. And I think one thing that needs to be highlighted is on that day that we have the privilege in Dora of having 2 centenarians, both of whom were born within a mile of each other, went to school together, married within a mile of each other, and both of them are heading now for 101 years of age, and they planted an oak tree in commemoration of the 1500th anniversary of the birth of St. Colmcille.
Dora Colmcille's legacy there, the second of the 2 videos, and we would like to remind those of you who are watching and listening on Zoom to submit your questions and comments, as we will have more panel discussions coming up later. But now we have 2 further videos to show you. The first is from the very, very active Colmcille 1500 group in Kells, Cannon-this-More and the Mee, and this is a creative dance video, Gamble, with Emily Kilkenny Roddy, and that will be followed by a video when we travel to Sligo, a video produced by Media, The Battle of the Books, the story of St. Colmcille and Sligo. So enjoy these videos.
ghosts can see me fly.
These hands cleanse the souls of others. But what of my own sins? 3,000 men dead on the slopes of Benbow. And to what end? The words of the scribe are dearly bought. My aim is to take the word of God and give it new life. Alas, that the sharing of our labors should be reviled. Even those who lead can lose their way from God's path.
You will return this psalter to Finian. To every cow its calf, to every book its copy.
To these words I will not yield. Pride is my sin. Cursed fool am I who draws the blood of my brethren. I leave, upon the command of Malash of Inishmurray, to seek redemption. To Scotland and exile. To claim a Christian life for every one my sins have lost. In time, our work will find a path to Drumcliff again. The Cahach I set aside. My path now takes a different course. It is for others to write its final page.
was Colmcille, the Battle of the Books there, ending those 2 videos, and we'll have more videos coming later. We're moving on now to session 3 in our exploration of Colmcille, travelling from Ireland to Scotland and all the shared heritage and the legacy that he is leaving. The session is called Scotland and Returning. Albain agus Feliu, mar sin harsel lin inish go Halbain, lina Horace a Lanston agus a valach and sin go Helen. We'd like to draw your attention to the illustrated map of Colmcille to mark Colmcille's birthday tomorrow. Donegal County Council have produced an illustrated map of some of the key sites and locations in Ireland and Scotland linked to the saint, and I believe printed copies will be available as well, but it's a beautifully illustrated map and it really shows the spread and the vastness of all the Columban sites between both countries. And as Colmcille arrived from Ireland, he first set foot in Argyll in Kin-Adas South End, and you can see some of those sites there on the illustrated map. But we're going to see 2 videos now that are from the Colmcille Legacy Award. Duas Gilab Colmcille. These 2 videos will be played one after the other. This is a national award in partnership with Bord na Gaelic to celebrate Gaelic culture, arts, language. And firstly, we'll be watching Lee Colmcille, which is a choral arrangement by the musician Andrew Dunlop from Connell in Argyll, featuring both his sister Joy Dunlop, one of our panellists, and also Alistair White, one of our panellists, singing. And central to it, Andrew said, was Colmcille's message of faith, hope and peace, Credu, Dohos agus Shichan. And then we'll be moving on to our second piece, a mixture of audio and visuals by the artist Judy Parrott, who's based in Butte. It's called Falponek and Shadow Clouds, and is a series looking at the interactions between landscape, weather and the person. But we'll start first with our choral piece.
Fulpanach, Felhalanach, Fiavlanach, Hafudak, Farag, Fdinasach, het fisker voer si falnachkrach. Si vaak al faun fit volsglan het fannen, de voedach kun feuitjin, le fatach vifanach. Agus farspak a fehuke voedachal, gus falla bre vuil farantisch, le fri iesk, a fo ian.
We're moving on now, and after travelling from Ireland to Scotland through Argyll, Colmcille settled in Iona, Elan where he built his famous monastery, remaining there until his death in 597. We have some more videos here celebrating Colmcille-Columba's Scottish legacy, and we'll have two videos, one after the other. The first is called Light Waves and was produced by Historic Environment Scotland. It's a mixture of music, poetry in Gaelic, English and Scots, celebrating Scotland's coasts and waters. Music from the group Nightworks, and also featuring the poets Colin Branwell, Peter McKay and Roseanne Watt. And the second piece is called Ilan Colmcille agus Uglish na Hí, Colmcille in the Western Isles, a video funded under Jontas Scéim Jontas Colmcille to Inshigal and the Colmcille Connection. And this video has been voiced by Shona McClellan, who works with Corle na Nalanshire.
In Doch Garich, a single mast, its forestays like a map of faults, sticks up at an angle to the surface. Columba mistakes it for the monstrous neck that rises nightly in his dreams. Columba keels at the currach's bow and prays like a dove for the mainland to cease, to be back on Iona, among the cloisters. The short seas here would stop a motor in its tracks. The same wind fills a sail and turns the loch to memory. Loch Ness gives way to Fort Augustus. One loch empties, water digs into the next. From the shallows of Loch Oich, a railway line with saplings ossified and old stone bridges picked up through clearings like ammonites preserved in slat.
sé seo Ilan Colmcille. Stéigteag bia loch Irisort an an scíad na páthce iad Ilan Leoas. Son féin chun an Déalainn a cosad idir cromúr agus cóbéic, agus a comasach féinige nó a hán lá an ísal. A bech gan gur an na hea a hánig a hiad mánach go tíd iad Ilan Leoas, agus is stéich na tuglachan éclise far a bhéil na tuglachan an dú. U gan éclise de hógal gomach cóchtach leis na héclasan eile a hád iain an an Leoas, léid 9 mil roie an an níis. Bei có úsich do 9 Colmcille a van an 9 mil roie. Hij darf úsich hoe réit na tochtigen seo, agus ha tochlichen a bhí iad an lárach seo suas chun an deach go flin diac. Chai an lárach enamachach an sa leorig Marstein, a description of the Western Islands of Scotland. A chai úsich man dia flin diac snuchid sa cóig. Gehinnetog gata, ha muid an náte a gra gan deach an tócalach as sin a feichcin an dú, gan deach sin a hógal le murachug mach cynnig, no murachug mór, mach vich gurachig, in Schemerland don hier le híforst an an Leoas, an dia flin diac is kerrit, gom an dia flin diac is nuchid. Bei seo an nuchlog a bhar iain an an scíad na páthce, agus bhaid a chleachgach suas chun an nu flin diac. Gas an clog rovic son a chleachgach as té seo. Sé Ilan be clog a han, maithe son cuairte gáil, go háirí nó a hán lá an ísal. Seoach of Eccles na Hui, fasgur stornavag idir an Leoas. Han tóglach seo stéite nó Dorlan, pís de half le uisce iad gach túf. San bhana seo a hánig an daine Gaelig. Ha bheachgan go rá tóglaich in an lárach seo an san tíamh agus an teach go flin, le céal le nuamh chachtan. Cha a Nicholas a hanan dú iad inimecha a stí nuamh Colmcille an san ceir flin diaag. In dú ha an nuamhan seo dheachcin iad a dhéchte chuna chlog. Get nach de hiúil Colmcille go fatar i leolas, hánig manní chéile agus dhéanamhichat na hiclasin as a dhé. An a tóglachan hasin na feichcin an dú an ceir flin diaag. Cha móran na tóglachan na legal, pís an éile a chudrúa, nó éad a hógal, an toiseach le clanbhích cnéchil agus an nuairsin le clanbhích cléirt. Ha clach ganneabhích agus níos leosach a chléachga is an na hógal. In pís a sinne den Nicholas sé sin na ballachan a coid go tua, an chancel agus an corp éclaise. Ha na ballachan go dés na súre agus chun cóige flin diaag, bei seo clch clanbhích cléirt. Ha nuai de laif lí den fórhaid sé seo an nuai ag ruadí mach cléirt, an deachgah cean cinní ag clanbhích cléirt nó síal thorgal. Básaige an sa bliana céhir diaag nuchad sa hoch. Éad an nuag ha luch le sleuch agus claiamh agus le clocach me cheann, máileach agus éide aramach géid. Éad an nuag éile ag mairat na chinnigin had an túbhcheart den fórhaid, sí nían ruadí mar cléirt. Scrítead am an matan a gra garí an bantrach ag lachlainn mach ginnigin, sgan de básaí an sa bliana cuairtí agus a trí. Ha ag má cóchtach gan deach ilan Colmcille agus éclas na hu a hógáil an toiseach mar éclasin na bhanich, agus línte na sté seo chéilte de cuach agus politics na cínian, sté na mían úsin. An dú ha na láirich seo mar fáiste slí Colmcille ans na hélan na níir, agus get nach de ruig Colmcille leolas a héin, a an díle begace na dheachcin iad cruúch na tíre na hélan seo háast.
Ellen Colmcille agus Uglish na hí in sin the second video there from the Western Isles Trust, narrated by Shauna McClelland. Well, tá mid chun filiú tomul éireann inis an Belagis a dúirt gur Colmcille a héin na lucacha cos go bretha ríis in éireann in éada imart. We're going to return briefly to Ireland, despite folklore that Colmcille himself said he would not set foot again in Ireland once he left. Well, he returned on at least one occasion. The Chogal Drumcat, south of Limavady, the Convention of Drumcat, that probably happened in the 570s. In this special video, Causeway Coast, The Strings of Heaven, we will enjoy an original composition by local harpists. It's composed by Nollaig Nivrali from Dungiven, with vocals by Aoife Nigigin, and it showcases the shared heritage and the wonderful revival of the harping tradition in the Causeway Coast and Glens area, and another musical celebration of New Colmcille here, the Causeway Coast Strings of Heaven. Alanta in sin, intajas strings of heaven, causeway coast, la nolik, ní vrali, agus ifin gigin, agus clairshari is canter, huiskart and chosta, agus neglinche, agus is jasarod, and tradition shina ekal arish. Well, viewers at home, we hope you keep submitting your questions because we are about to start the Scottish panel discussion. They've been waiting very patiently with us since we began earlier here in the Great Hall in Magee. They're with us on Zoom. I'll introduce them again in case you've tuned in just a little bit after the beginning. We have Dr. Alistair White with us, Joy Dunlop and Brienne O'Hara, and all three of them are with us on Zoom. We've heard and we've been discussing a lot about Colmcille-Columba, as he's also known in Scotland's legacy here in Ireland, and the importance of, I suppose, his story and how it has lasted in folklore and myth and historical fact. Maybe to you first, Alistair, a general question that I'll then put to the three of you. Is the Colmcille story, the Columba story, as well known in Scotland as it would appear to be in Ireland? Is it something that people grow up hearing about, or is it maybe coming more to prominence now with this centenary celebration?
Well, skiet al mach gyda mil am ac adanya, agus tachblid sy'n gwch. Iar yn cainil cenolta na braia cwchach, agus melverneach gyr tacharstas gasta. I think that's a really interesting question. I think Colmcille certainly has been on everyone's minds this particular year. And I suppose I've got a couple of... Yes, I did hear a bit about Colmcille growing up, but because of the... And I'm actually from a place, I've got an interest in place names myself, and I'm actually from a wee village called Colmcille, the kind of black bay of Columba, and we've got our own kind of lore attached to the place. But because of that rapid decline of Gaelic in the area that I'm from Iona's slightly less illustrious neighbouring island of Mull, I didn't hear quite as much as I might have, having grown up 100 years ago. But through kind of academic research and taking a real interest in Columba as a clearly very significant figure in the lives of Gaelic speakers from my area in the past for 1500 years, I've been able to I think it's been important. He has been an important part of me really piecing together my identity and getting to know my language and the dialect of my own area better. And I think that's the significance and relevance of Colmcille today. We have an opportunity in the place names and the place lore and everything that's associated with Colmcille, and of course that shared cultural heritage with yourselves across through the Muile to really inspire the next generation of Gaelic speakers and Irish speakers by passing on these things and celebrating that shared cultural heritage.
And we'll return to the place names topic now in a minute, but I would like to set that same question to you, Joy. Did you have any special knowledge of Colmcille growing up? Would he have been commonly featured in any songs or any musical pieces that you would have known growing up there in Argyll?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with a lot of what Alistair said there. With the decline of Gaelic, probably the decline of understanding of Colmcille came hand in hand. So because I was interested in music, that's probably why I would have had a wee bit more of a knowledge of him. And you heard Loy Colmcille, a wee bit of that video earlier. That was one of the first Gaelic songs I learned. And in some ways the words were simple enough that even people without Gaelic could pick it up, but it was also a tune that you'd sometimes hear sung in church. So from that side, there was a bit of understanding, but there's probably, well, there's definitely a lack of understanding, I would say, in the wider area. And I would guess even in Argyll, that if you spoke to people who are not Gaelic speakers or who aren't interested in the culture, they'd have heard of him. But I doubt they'd actually really be able to tell you that much about him. And if you looked at Scotland as a whole, I think it would be even less, just because there is that crack, I guess, and separation of language and culture for many. But I would say those who grew up with an understanding of language and culture would at least know and could tell you a wee bit about the life of Columba or Colmcille.
It's very interesting that you both mentioned there the Gaelic connection going so deep with the Colmcille story, and I suppose as it's seen here with Gaelic and Colmcille and his folklore. And Brienne, in your own job promoting Gaelic, promoting the connections between Ireland and Scotland, Éireann agus Alban, do you see this special commemoration and the year that we have had running up to it as more of an opportunity to maybe reignite that interest, not just in Colmcille, but in everything associated with the culture, the music, arts, language, that he's sort of an example of the connection between Ireland and Scotland, the travel over and back across through the Muile that so many people, especially in the northwest of Ireland, would know about. Do you see that now as a chance to further that story and to further the connection?
Yes, absolutely. That's the reason why the Columba or the Colmcille scheme was set up between Forras na Gaeilge and Bors na Gaelic as part of the Good Friday Agreement, and the understanding was to get Gaelic and Gaelic-speaking communities working together, celebrating our combined culture. And I think a lot of people have found out an awful lot about Colmcille over this past year, and we are looking to now the legacy of this year. And as someone said, the year isn't really over. It'll keep going, and we'll keep celebrating the year. And in fact, tomorrow we're launching our funding scheme, the Colmcille from the Scotland side, from Bors na Gaelic. We're launching that tomorrow, and people can check out that if they want to make those connections between Gaelic and Gaelic Scotland and Ireland.
Alistair, you spoke about the place names in your own research, and you have been involved in research here in Ireland as well, a kind of a a project sort of spanning across the sea to try and link the heritage and the place names and the linked culture between young people from your own home place and people in the Connemara area. How has that research gone, and has there been much of a connection, and are you uncovering more in terms of your research?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing to do. We're fortunate enough to get funding from Colmcille and Bors na Gaelic, as Brienne mentioned earlier. And yes, just to say, I've been working with young people in Mull, in Colmcille-Columba in Tobermory High School, and working with partners at Ollscoil na HÉireann and Galliv in UI Galway, and Dr. Leo Mahashabil and the filmmaker Sean Bretnach, who are involved on the Irish side of things. And I think, yeah, it has allowed me to find out a bit more about. I mean, I was aware of the kind of lore attached to the village that I was brought up in myself, but I found out some other things. We've got a Suí Colmcille in Mull as well, and that Brian was talking about a Suí Colmcille in the video earlier on. So it has allowed me to kind of get to know lore from other places in my own area, and of course some of the things that Liam's been researching and sharing with young people in his area. And I think, yeah, just really important to kind of raise awareness of these shared connections among young people. Again, kind of reinforcing that identity, shared identity, forming new connections. Brienne touched on that just a second ago, and here's to another 1,500 years of that.
And have you uncovered and maybe further understood some of the place names that have Columban connections, maybe not directly Colmcille himself, but his followers who obviously came to Iona, who would have been Gaelic speakers, who then maybe influenced the surrounding areas, the surrounding islands as well? Would local people maybe understand a lot of the references to the Columban tradition?
I think so, yes. I mean, we've concentrated on Colmcille himself in this project, but there are many other saints celebrated. I mean, Colmcille is a kind of pan-Gaelic saint, I suppose, and I think every region in Scotland, every island has a connection, some sort of place name or place lore associated with Colmcille or the kind of wider Columban familia, I suppose, of saints. So yeah, there are lots of other projects to be done there on Colmcille is a very important example of a saint who kind of symbolises that shared cultural heritage and language. But yeah, there are lots of other projects to be done yet as well.
Joy, you spoke about maybe the separation of the Columban story went hand in hand with maybe the decline of Gaelic in the area, and people who maybe aren't interested don't fully understand the wealth of it. The Colmcille scheme, of course, connects Ireland and Scotland in so many different cultural ways. I know you yourself have been involved in many of those, especially in music, dance, coming over to Ireland, taking people to Scotland on trips and so on. Has it helped maybe further and strengthen that bond, the Celtic bond between both countries for yourself, and maybe better understand your own Gaelic and musical tradition?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's so obvious that we are the one people, and even that we are the one language. I'm always surprised actually how much I understand and how much I can get through just in conversation without having to go to English. And I think it's really important to celebrate that shared heritage and just look at how history guides this. And if it's not relevant to today, people aren't interested. Folk want something that means something special to them. So I think it is really important that we look at how do we make this relevant to today, to today's Gaels, but also maybe to those who don't have that really obvious link to the language. And definitely the music is a really successful way to get folk enjoyed. You know, to me, who was born, brought up in Argyll with a grandfather from Donegal, you don't need to explain to me how important the links are between the two countries. You know, we get this, but actually I think it's really interesting when you speak to folk who maybe aren't brought up in that way to find out that we have lots of the same words, we have the same songs. I mean, I love it when I come over and I think, oh, we've got that song, we just have different words to it. And the more you can do that, the more you can make it relevant to today, and the more you can inspire each other, I think is only going to be a good thing. And I can't wait until it gets to the time where we can start to do a bit more travelling again and visit each other, because I know from going over to Ireland, I always get so much out of that. I feel really inspired, but actually when people come the other way as well, I can see that for them it's a chance to not just show off their culture, but actually see the similarities and differences in real life, because there is nothing better than just experiencing that link and talking to folk and sharing that cultural heritage. It's really, really special. We're so lucky to have that, and events like this can only help to promote Colmcille, but actually the bigger picture on both sides of Struth Maile.
And I suppose at the moment, as you said, with travel not being as free as people would like, mediums such as Zoom here, but the podcast that you're also involved in, it's a way of showcasing that common language and tangi edrin, and also entertaining people. It's about that as well. It's not just education, it's shiamsiart, it's providing something that people enjoy.
Absolutely, because folk are busy. You know, people have very, very busy lives, and you have to provide something that people are going to want to get involved in, and that's what sucked me in and made me so enthusiastic. I was like, this is amazing. Here is a language, here is a culture that's thriving, it's vibrant, it's spoken by young people, and for me that was a real pull and draw when I went over to Ireland. It was kind of like our culture but not the same, and you could see the similarities and the differences, and I found it really inspiring to learn about Irish culture. And I've got to be honest, when going over to Ireland, I felt quite often I learned more about Colmcille and the history, because it is so strong over there, and I think you have this really deep rooted cultural history that's maybe for us started to wash out a wee bit over the years. So that was really inspiring, and it made me want to go back and find out more about my history and my culture, and that can only be a good thing, that people are feeling, you know what, this is relevant to today despite the fact it happened 1,500 years ago.
Brienne, as Joy and Alistair have said there, Colmcille, the shared saint, the shared tradition, you straddle both traditions and promote both. what is the challenge, or what is maybe the biggest obstacle now to carrying on with this Colmcille year, carrying on that there've been so many events, people know a lot more, but how do you keep that momentum going, the legacy we've spoken about today that has been so raised by this special 1500 year, how do you keep that momentum going forward in terms of Gaelic culture and the things that we share in common between both islands?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's been very difficult this year because we expected to be getting together a lot more in person, as Joy was just promoting. I think one of the things we've learned over the past year is that we can get together on Zoom. We can get together online and actually have a céilí and enjoy ourselves. And maybe that's one of the legacies that we'll be able to keep doing this. I know at Bors na Gaelic, one of the things we're working on is a new scheme called Chalky, or Use It Together, and it's going to be promoting the use of Gaelic online and in person and just mapping that out. And maybe people from Ireland, if they do come and visit Scotland, or if they visit online as such, you'll be able to find out where people are speaking the language, and we'll be able to work more closely together. And likewise, you know, one of the things myself and Joy are working on is Cuairt na Gael, which will be bringing some Gaelic artists, including Joy, over to Ulster to perform in March, and that will be, if you don't mind me promoting it, it'll be in Belfast, in Gweedore, Dira and Mullachban.
Wonderful, something to look forward to, and as you've all said, I suppose to strengthen the links that we've all been speaking about today from our Irish panel, from the Scottish panel. It's that shared connection and the shared, I suppose, pride and legacy of the saint. We have a panel na Halaban in Shin, and they'll be back with us shortly as well. Sinead, Joy, Brienne agus Alistair, agus Tamadinja Galalanz na Ray Inish Irwomachilla Fishanella. We're going to carry on now in a minute with another video from the Colmcille series. Our session 4 in our exploration of Colmcille and his legacy between Éireann and Albain. It's Eirart Colmcille, the legacy between Scotland and Ireland. 1500 years on, as we've said, we are here discussing, celebrating Colmcille's story, a Eirart, a Lorag, a Wark and Tohi, his legacy, his mark on society. And Donegal County Council have led an initiative to explore areas connected to Colmcille and wanting to light up symbolic buildings for the birthday, which is of course happening tomorrow. And Forest na Gaeilge commissioned designs, photographed key locations in Ireland, commissioned music and have produced a beautiful video. The video is called Colmcille-Columba, or Columba's Candle, and a nod to the saint writing by candlelight, La Solace na Goniel, and this is called A Film of Illuminations. It features a new composition by the noted Sean-Nós singer from Oriel, Pedrigi Ní Bhuillecháin, and these images will be seen tomorrow from areas from Garth and Tyrone, weather permitting, as we're awaiting Storm Barra at the moment, but it will be seen. And also to remind people that if you are commemorating Colmcille tomorrow, people are being asked to light a candle at approximately 5:21 in celebration of the birth year of 521. But now we'll have a look at Colmcille, Columba's Candle.
The Spirit was near. The Hivne Lingafoy. Kunyal yal na felum, olam kilya mor, kolam bon na shikhna. Father Warden Nagael Bill. Dog to cheer na hoige, hog to wire Alban Road. Ta kuala fada ngartan. Oh Jimmy to a store. Sprag to alin skriven.
Ínta jazz fad in sin cin le colm buin na siochanna a cheol ag peidirgí níhuiilachan agus coinil Colmcille-Columba's candle agus náia cyfnigí, but there's a very coinil a lasú moira ag bommate agus fihinné quick a givne vre new Colmcille 521 for those who want to commemorate his birth date. Well, we've almost come to the end, but not before our panel members have a chance to maybe add in a few of their comments, and I know there are two beside me here champing at the bit to discuss a few topics that came up in some of the videos, and we'll give everyone on our panel a chance to sum up and to give us their closing thoughts on Colmcille. I'm going to start with the Irish panel, two of whom who are here with me, Brian Lacey and Christy Gillespie, and of course Malachy O'Neill is with us on Zoom. But perhaps Christy, firstly, I know you had you wanted to raise a question regarding the Battle of the Books, and did such an event happen, and the controversy that went with that and with the monasteries?
Certainly the battle happened in 561, because in Adamnan's book, or his Life of Colmcille, he actually mentions it 3 times, where he says 2 years after the Battle of Culdravna, Columba left Ireland for Scotland to become a pilgrim for Christ. So not alone was the battle looked on as being very, very important, but also possibly the catalyst as to why he decided to leave in the end. Now, there's a number of theories put up. It's Cuildreimhne is often known as the Battle of the Book, and as Brian Lacey has already pointed out in an excellent video that he's done, that the later story of the book being copied, and we all learnt it in school, it's nothing more than a fable. But certainly at that time, there was a huge problem between himself and the High King, who was a relation of his, Diarmid MacCarwell. And a lot of it, I would say, came down to the fact that he still had one foot in the pagan camp. And as a result, Colmcille wasn't very happy with this. He was keeping the Féis of Tara going, and so on. Also, we are told that Diarmid had one of his, he had a hostage there. He was Cuernan, the son of the King of Connacht, and he was in Colmcille's care. And he even though he was under Colmcille's care, the High King had him executed. And so there was a number of things like this building up between them. But also, I think, on a very simple basis, Colmcille belonged to the Northern Nail, the High King belonged to the Southern Nail. They were going at each other, and it was only going to be a matter of time. And eventually, the two sides met at Cuildreimhne, which is only a mile from Drumcliff in County Sligo. That's where W.B. Yeats is buried, but it's actually a Columban monastery as well. And when you're driving on the road from Donegal to Sligo, you actually drive through the monastery, because there's a high cross on one side of the road, the Round Tower is on the other side of the road. But it looks like the High King was the aggressor in this case, because he comes as far as Sligo with his army, but Colmcille's clan end up winning the battle. There's supposed to be 3,000 killed in the battle, and that it caused him a lot of grief afterwards, with the result that he possibly decided to leave Ireland at that time, maybe because he felt that he needed to distance himself from his family. He was getting too caught up in the whole thing, which I'll explain in a wee while. But also, I think the main reason he went to Scotland was because one of the most amazing things about Colmcille and his fraternity was all of the monasteries that they set up at the time. Now, he had nowhere else to go, because there was a number of other saints doing similar in Ireland at the time. And because he was such a voracious worker, Colmcille, I would think that what he did was he moved to Western Scotland, where he knew there was virgin territory, and he could start this process all over again.
Brian, I might put that question to you. In exile or on an evangelizing mission, when he left Ireland, what would be your reading of his leaving and his basing in Iona?
I don't think it has anything to do with the Battle of a Book. I think that's a legend that develops much later on. And I mean, Adamnon tells us that he left Ireland as a pilgrim for Christ. That's what he says. And that he went possibly really to look for an isolated place, a desert place. I mean, the ocean was the desert. In fact, all the literature of the time describes the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, as the desert. It's a wet desert, but it's still a desert. And he goes like the monks of Egypt, going into the desert down there. Colmcille goes off into the desert, and he sets up this wonderful institution, the Monastery of Iona, which grows and blossoms and becomes, I mean, without any doubt, one of the great, great institutions of Western Christianity. And so much came out of that. Not only in religious terms, but in scientific terms, in political terms, in artistic terms. You know, I mean, we now look back at things like the Book of Kells and the high crosses. They were immensely important religious symbols in their day. To us, they're largely archaeological objects or art objects. But the importance of all of that, I mean, that really was pioneering in all sorts of ways. And all of that goes back to Colmcille, or St. Columba. So, Beidir sin, agus rocky me caiim mo wéchas go bhfuil tosa agus Deirdre agus na dine eile tá taobhhéireann ó coite bhí sé iontar mai bheith páirte go.
Kinship, well, we're going to sum up with our panel members, and I might ask you all the legacy. What is Colmcille's legacy? Christy, I'll start with you first. Briefly, what is his greatest legacy, or what is he to be remembered for?
Well, we're here 1,500 years later, and we're commemorating both him and his federation. So you have to kind of ask the question, well, why? Well, I think firstly, the vast series of monasteries that they set up in both Ireland and in Scotland. And I suppose you have to look at it in terms of, in so many ways, he was a leader, but he created so many firsts. He was the first saint to do this. And no other saint following him in Ireland did it on such a vast scale. I think, secondly, you have to look at the situation where Adamnan calls him the father and the founder of monasteries. He's the first to go to another country and to evangelize it from Ireland. If you take the arts, you have all of the literary achievements. Like the three greatest illustrated books are all Columban books. So you've got the Book of Kells, the Book of Doral, the Book of Lindisfarne. But also his monks, both then and afterwards, they were writing books on the likes of legal studies, science books, geography books. Adamnan or Eunan, who wrote the life of Colmcille, he was the first person ever to do a travelogue of the Holy Land. He was the first, in diplomatic terms, you have the likes of, that they brought out Lex Innocentum, which was the law of the innocents, which was, well, what happens at a time of war for the likes of women, children, the clergy, and that kind of prefaced really the Geneva Conventions that have come since. Also, like things like the first Christian inauguration that has been written down was Colmcille inaugurating St. Aidan on the island of Iona. And that stone that was used in that inauguration became the stone of Scone, which is the stone now that the kings and queens of England use in Westminster Abbey. But last but not least, if you wanted maybe one thing above anything else to give us the idea of the legacy of Colmcille, and he did prophesy this himself, that there is actually 60 kings buried on Iona. There's 48 Scottish, there's 8 Norwegian, 4 Irish, including Macbeth and Duncan, who were made famous by Shakespeare. So in that line alone, I think this is why we commemorate him 1,500 years later.
Lovely, very comprehensive list there. Brian, I'll go to you next, his legacy.
I agree with everything Christy said, but I think on this occasion, given that we're talking about the links between Ireland and Scotland, we can't leave out the Loch Ness Monster. And Columba is the story, the earliest appearance of the Loch Ness Monster is in a miracle story of Colmcille written up by Adamnan. So it may not be his greatest legacy, but certainly it's probably the best known legacy.
Thank you, Brian. Bucamaga Malachy O'Neill, Eirart Colmcille's legacy for you, Malachy?
Well, near while I'm called Sanyomiak le Nessie, Geberby, Shinracha, just exmeet our Colmcille, August an Eirart Grinchish and either a da here, August Egark the boil ella den Faniel Maratam Sanam Lahar Egark are Brienne O'Hara and Shaw August here the Rian ta Lairskyle the here Colmcille. So the tier Colmcille map that was produced by Colmcille and a number of years ago and has obviously been re-energized by this entire celebration of conversation this year. I think, and I think also of the Sual Ella that has been the strapline for TZA Cahar in that same period. Colmcille and the way we now look at that shared heritage, I think it has changed our perspective of our relations both locally, nationally and globally, and the way in which we continue to interpret that legacy of Colmcille through events like today, through the commissions from the Royal Irish Academy that I mentioned earlier, and through the work that is ongoing in terms of scholarship with the likes of Christy and Brian in the room today, our eminent panel from Scotland. Also, there's much still to be done. There's much creativity still to be had in this process, and I think we're all privileged to play some small part in it. So, Gurmila Moigav Rig, Tapi Liv, August Mila Buhis.
Mila Buhis Malachy. Well, I'll move to our Scottish panel na Halaban Inish agus Tashahama Latsa Alistair White. Eirart Colmcille's legacy, perhaps in terms of Scotland for yourself, or the shared connection between Scotland and Ireland?
Yeah, I would just echo what the other panelists have said so far. And also just to add, I think that in cultural memory, Colmcille is remembered as a singer-poet. We've seen some amazing pieces of original art this afternoon at this event, and it's clear that Colmcille is inspiring a kind of current generation of artists, and I think that he can continue to inspire future generations as well. I think just drawing on my own personal experience, I've certainly had opportunities to make connections with people on your side of Struth na Mille directly through Colmcille, kind of knowledge that I've picked up, and a kind of willingness, I suppose, to celebrate something that's quite local to me. For example, at Moonchidus a few years ago, where I met Dr. Brian Lacey for the first time, and have kept up a connection with him. So I just hope that and I think that Colmcille can be a kind of symbolic of that connection, that shared connection between the two areas that we're talking about. And as I said earlier on, here's to another 1500 years of that.
Gyda míle maithigad Alistair, a bagú réithig Brienne O'Hara. Brienne, Eirart, Colmcille's legacy, or what will come out of this for you?
Well, as I said, I think it's really important that we continue to celebrate the links between Ireland and Scotland. They've always been there, and I think Colmcille embodies that connection. We need to look forward to how we can continue to communicate, how we can continue to learn each other's dialects, if we want to put it. I know that Joyce said it's more or less the same language, but there is lots of work to be done so that our school children can experience each other's Gaelic, the slightly different take on the culture. Also, personally, I'm quite interested in the international context. We heard there that Norwegian kings or Norse kings were also buried in Ilani, and just being able to celebrate the influence of Colmcille and our culture internationally, and to make those links with the Scandinavian countries. And I suppose to combat the likes of Brexit, not wanting to bring politics into it, we need to work more closely together, culturally and economically and every other way. So if there's something that Colmcille can do, that can be a wonderful legacy as well.
Right, go maithigad in Brienne, and last but not least, Joy. Eirart, Colmcille, what is the legacy of this Colmcille commemoration for yourself?
Try that again. There's nothing really that I can say that other people haven't already so succinctly said. But for me, there's three things: in canon, in cheese, agus na dúine. And that encapsulates everything about Colmcille for me. You're gachtúv Struth na Mille on both sides of Struth na Mille, because it is about the people, it's about the language and the culture. And I think whatever we can do to promote that, particularly in a modern age when Sold na Bearla is everywhere, whatever we can do to prove that Gaelic, Gaelic, the culture, the heritage is a thriving part of today and a very relevant part of today's life, the more the better. And once things open up again, hopefully we can do that in person, but if not, events like this over Zoom, I think for me through lockdown have actually reminded me that, you know, the world isn't actually that big. We are all the same people, despite the fact we're a wee bit further away from others than normal. And thank you so much, Tapal of Gamod, our son, Cúriga Horsgos of my first in the show. I think events like this are so important, and it's really special to feel like we are part of that wider community.
Míle buíochas Joy, agus míle buíochas le panel na Halaban Marantang, agus le panel na Héireann, mo buíochas le Malachy O'Neill, le Alistair White, le Joy Dunlop, le Brienne O'Hara, Brian Lacey, agus Christy Gillespie, Lynn Inshaw. And many thanks, as I said, to our panels who helped and who really furthered the discussion today. A special thanks to our video contributors for beautiful videos that are to be found in full. We'll give you all the links later and that you can watch them back yourselves. To the funders of the event, Northwest Development Fund, Creative Ireland and Forest na Gaelic as well, Míle buíochas. Special thanks to Deirdre Hart for her hard work on this project, and to all her colleagues in Donegal County Council and Derry City and Strabane District Council, Míle buíochas. To Joanne Sweeney of the Digital Training Institute for Event Management, Marketing and ensuring that today ran very smoothly here in the Great Hall in in Magee and also with our Zoom guests. Many thanks for technical support and wonderful camera work, Bradis Media, who kept us on air and ensured that you were all able to join us from around the world. And a special thanks to Magee University for hosting us in this beautiful setting. It would have been lovely to have an audience, but perhaps there are opportunities again. Míle buíochas le Neil McGrory for video production. He produced several of the videos, especially for today's event, and to Lorcan Doherty, photographer, who was here as well. And míle buíochas go háirithe to all the viewers who joined us today, who submitted questions, who followed the discussion, and who were promoting the event online. Míle buíochas libse ar fad. As we come to the end of this special event to celebrate the legacy and the commemoration of Colmcille on the eve of the commemoration of his birth, I would like to remind those of you watching that there will be a wide and varied list of events happening, some online, some hopefully in person, weather permitting, tomorrow around the Northwest and around the country. If you want to find information on those events, the website is www.colmcille1500.com, and on Facebook as well, www.facebook.com/Colmcille1500 Northwest. And if you want to watch back today's discussion, and why wouldn't you, to learn more about Colmcille, we've all been educated today during the discussion, you can do that on those platforms as well. Well, tá sé nám sléine egal agah in seo an Hallamór, in seo in Ulscoil Vigí, in seo an Naie, agus am gala egal sléin le Fishanvig. We're going to leave you with a video, Camino Colmcille. This is a legacy project that intends to establish a pilgrimage trail linking the Columban sites in Donegal, Derry, the North Sperrins and the Ban, going as far as Argyll and going to Iona as Colmcille himself travelled. This project is being led by the Diocese of Rafo and others, and it's going to be a very exciting project and one that I think will garner a lot of international interest following Colmcille's footsteps. Buinigí Sultas agus Buinigí Sult is Cilleru a Lebrehe. We'll leave you with the video. Many thanks for being with us here today in Magee.
For centuries, pilgrims have followed the holy footsteps of religious visionaries around the world in search of their own spiritual enlightenment. One of the most influential figures to spread Christianity was Saint Columba, or Colmcille, a 6th century Irish monk who travelled extensively throughout Ireland and Scotland, establishing monasteries while spreading the word of Christ. His legacy still shines brightly today, and to celebrate his 1500th birthday, we are linking the pilgrimages, paths and major sites associated with his incredible story. Colmcille, or St. Columba's Way, is a new, exciting and ambitious pilgrimage close to home, a getaway to some of the most beautiful and awe-inspiring parts of the world. Setting off with just a backpack, it's a journey back to the past to seek answers for the future. Walking through stunning landscapes, along coastal paths and over mountains, it is a route steeped in heritage, culture and adventure. The first part of the pilgrimage is ready to walk now. Covering St. Columba's life in Ireland before he left for Scotland, the trail starts in Donegal town or Glen Colmcille, a stunning valley on the edge of the wild and rugged Atlantic coastline. This Irish-speaking area has strong links with Columba, who is commemorated in a local short pilgrimage known as Turris Colmcille, around 15 stations. The route continues up through Ardara, Dunglow and Gweedore, and the option of a trip from Maharoroti to Torrey Island, the most remote of Ireland's inhabited islands. The parishes of Gortacharka and Falcara are steeped in the history of Colmcille, and pilgrims can visit Rye Cross, the largest medieval stone cross in the country. Beautiful scenic pathways offer walkers plenty of options, including travelling west towards the stunning coastal forest park in Ards before heading towards Colmcille's home country. Take your time walking through the spectacular Glenveigh National Park, which eventually leads to the historic area of Gartan, the place where St. Columba was born in 521 AD at his family home place in Gartan Abbey. Continuing through Kilmacrennan, where Colmcille was baptised and received his early education, walk to the vibrant town of Letterkenny and on to historic Raphoe. A stroll along the banks of the River Foyle leads to the multicultural city of Dora Colmcille, now known as Derry or Londonderry. Founded by Columba, this walled city is home to an inspiring Columban trail and is where he started his journey to self-imposed exile in Scotland. As St. Columba and his companions sailed up Loch Foyle, he leapt from their boat for one last walk along the beautiful east coast of Inishowen before rejoining his companions at Shrove, where the current pilgrimage finishes. Like traditional caminos, Colmcille is an expansive journey which offers a plethora of routes, allowing travellers to make the trail their own. Whether walking to be sociable or solitary, a family with little ones looking for an afternoon of discovery, or an experienced trekker with a thirst for history. With so much to see and do, the options are endless. But this is just the beginning of following in St. Columba's footsteps. In the near future, the route will then connect the path he blazed across Northern Ireland and over the turbulent sea to Scotland. The final destination of this ambitious pilgrimage is the small Hebridean island of Iona, St. Columba's final resting place, and where he founded his iconic monastery, which has become an epicenter of religious worship today. This Columban trail has it all. Reconnecting with faith through nature and history, this pilgrimage is an opportunity to slow down, to take the time you need, to select your own stops and set your own pace. Colmcille has something for everyone.